My name is Josef Eisinger, and I was born in Vienna, in Austria, in 1924. And after a lot of adventures, ended up here in New York in 2021, a long time. I lived in an apartment building in the 3rd district of Vienna, where I grew up and where I went to school, and where I lived with my parents and with my sister, who was 3 years older, who is 3 years older, and now lives in Toronto at age 100. Independently, incidentally, in her own home. I went to school for 4 years in an elementary school, just 2 blocks from where I lived, the Strohgasse, and then eventually was admitted into a rather elite high school, the Akademische Gymnasium, known as Akadgym, a well-known high school where many well-known physicists, in fact, were educated. On Sundays, we generally went for excursions in the mountains around Vienna, known as the Wienerwald. And I was an enthusiastic first Cub Scout and then Boy Scout, whose main activities, the Boy Scouts' main activities, consisted of singing and making notes when we were in the city, and on weekends and in the summertime we went on camping trips and mountaineering trips. But of course that all ended with the Anschluss, the occupation of Austria by the Nazis. My life was pretty serene, except that I had trouble with my Latin teacher in the high school. But apart from that, I can't claim that I had a great interest in academic subjects, but I was a keen football player, or soccer player, I should say, and did a lot of that. I preferred that to academia. But your values change as you go through life, as you know. And I think the biggest interruption of this ordinary Jewish middle-class kid in Vienna was, of course, the occupation of Austria in March 1938. My own personal experience of it is warplanes flew low over the city on the 12th of March 1938, dropping leaflets, and German bands played in public squares. There were lots of German troops marching in the streets and being driven in all kinds of vehicles. So it was obvious that no organized resistance was possible. The country was already overrun. And one of the things that emerged is the members of the Nazi Party, which had been illegal, now showed their faces. They had special insignia that made it clear who had been an illegal member of the party. The schools were closed, all shops were closed, and the persecution of Jews and of anti-Nazis, politicians, police officials, government officials, immediately began. In fact, it began on the very day of the invasion. Hundreds of anti-Nazi politicians were immediately arrested, including the mayor of Vienna, for instance, the police president. And they were arrested along with prominent and wealthy Jews, that they were shipped 2 weeks later to the first concentration camp in Dachau. In the case of the Jews, it was more an extortion extent. They were eventually released if they turned all the property over to the Nazi government. That all happened within the first 2 weeks, I would say. In fact, the first big train transport to Dachau took place 2 weeks after the Anschluss. A month after the Anschluss, the intentions of the Nazis became even clearer. All Jews were required to fill out documents that stated what they owned: real estate, shops, gold watches, even wedding rings. Clearly, to let people know, eventually all that stuff will be confiscated anyway. But they were very orderly about it, and I actually obtained a copy of the document my father had to fill out for the family. Fascinating to read. I think it actually appears in my memoir. But still, life for the Viennese Jews went on. They had to make a living, and the ways of making a living were fewer and fewer. So people turned to the other way out, which was to obtain a visa to some other country that would have them. And along with that came a culture of relearning professions, known as Umschulung in German, where Jews went to all kinds of courses to study professions that would help them get visas to other countries. For instance, my father took a course in watchmaking, thinking that that could be a useful trade. And I attended classes in being an electrician, and also other classes in being a blacksmith. So it seems, in retrospect, quite unlikely that the country would be in need of many blacksmiths. But there were illusions, and people were willing to try anything to get out of the country.